Think
Yeah.
about like how do you realize value from running experiments in your business? And I think the traditional view is like conversion rate optimization, right? Which is, hey, I want to improve the performance of my site. Obviously, that's really, really important. I think as programs mature, they are doing that and realizing a lot of value. They get a ton of unlocks, but then they have part two, which is like, hey, this is actually this really valuable tool to help the company make decisions. And I think there's like these tensions between the two a little bit, maybe at times. And so I was just talking to James the other day. We were talking about a really major manufacturer. They're giving the example of, hey, a question we have is like, we have 10 different brands in our company. And the way someone shops outside of our own websites is they go to a retailer and you can see all of our products across all brands in one. Like, should we do that on our own site? And
Yeah.
it's less actually about optimization and it's more about like trying to form a decision that a product manager or an executive needs to do. Should we
Yeah.
think about prioritization in that frame of mind?
It's a really good question. I think it kind of ties in really nicely with this idea that I like to talk about, which is experimentation shouldn't be a way to validate what you were going to do anyway. And it's not a way to pat yourself on the back and say, look how amazing this idea I had was. Experimentation should be used as a way to manage risk. That's what it's most effective at. And you can manage risk in terms of the best practice or ideas that you were going to run anyway. But it's more valuable when you're testing those ideas that you're maybe too nervous to try. Like imagine you're playing a video game and you reach a checkpoint and you know that I'm going to try something here, and if it doesn't work, I can go back to that checkpoint and just try again. Same idea. Like you don't really get that opportunity in business. Normally, you make the change and then you typically have to live with it, or you can course adjust. But with experimentation, it gives us that safety net to try out a lot of different ideas, things that we wouldn't do normally. And for a lot of companies that we work with, things that give them a competitive advantage. Because if their competitors are too nervous to try these ideas, if they're all kind of going for the safe middle of the road option, then there's a real advantage to be gained by testing the things that other people are too nervous to try. That's what would happen if we turned our whole commercial model on its head. What would happen if we introduced two new pricing tiers to our SaaS product, or took all of them away and just had one pricing tier, for example? What would happen if we shifted from monthly billing to only offering an annual plan, and so on and so on and so on? So there's tons of different ideas like that that people can have. And it's super valuable to run those ideas, but exactly to your question, that there becomes that challenge, which is, well, how do we, when we're thinking about prioritization, like we're dealing with two different things here. Like, half of us is looking to optimize the plans and pricing page, to continue that analogy, to say like, how do we best sell the functionality of this product? How do we make it kind of come to life for the users so they can self-select, which plan is right for them? And then we're trying to balance that against an idea that says, actually, we don't need to do any of that. We just need to have one product, because then people wouldn't need to choose between different plans because there's only one. Like these are two completely different ideas. So how do you manage that in terms of prioritization? And that's when we introduce another dimension in terms of the planning, which is when we think about risk. So we've spoken in the past about the idea of a risk profile, like the same as someone managing a portfolio of investments. They might have a risk strategy attached to it. So they might have some safe bets where they're not going to move the needle too much, but they're fairly dependable. They're probably fairly steady in terms of growth. But then you might also place a small amount of your portfolio where you've got some big bets, and they could crash and burn, or they could do really well. And we think about the same idea in terms of experimentation. For most companies, for most people, the bulk of your experiments should be those a little bit safer, kind of low risk and medium risk experiments. But at the same time, you also want to have some high risk experiments in there as well, because that's when you can really get that significant advantage. So ultimately, it comes down to that strategist who's looking at the prioritized backlog and saying, okay, it might be a less critical time of year in terms of when they're driving their sales, so they might be more inclined to put in a higher risk experiment. So there's some manual prioritization that is layered on top, or it might be a company that is working in a disruptive emerging space. So they might think, well, actually, let's steer away from those safe bets and let's try some bigger, bolder ideas, because there's no like established norm in this industry that we're operating in. So we need to take those bigger, bolder bets to push further ahead. We shouldn't be focusing on those more incremental improvements by just optimizing what we already did.
Yeah. Okay, well, fascinating. I think that also maybe tees up another topic we could probably do, which is just on like strategies for
Yeah,
running experiments based on what type of company you're in and whatnot. Because I think there's not like a one profile fits all by any means
yeah.
stage of what you're trying to do. Okay, very fascinating. Thank you once again. Greatly appreciate it.
Cool.
Cheers.
My pleasure. Thank you.